And since the first debate, a lot has changed. Well, some things have changed in the polls.
That's right, some things underneath the front runner. So let's go off the wall and take a closer look at the Fox News power rankings compared to months ago and how the candidates' performances may have contributed to their rise or decline. Well, let's take a look first at where we stand today. This is Fox News power rankings, and as they classify it, you've got the clear front-runner in Donald Trump, who, Pete, is polling north of 50%, approaching 60% in some polls.
Has not participated, as we know, in the first two debates, and it hasn't hurt him one bit.
And that's left a lot of the conversation as to who falls into second. The challengers right now is between, for second place, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. Pete, what we talked about yesterday is you now have Nikki Haley, who I believe has surpassed Ron DeSantis in New Hampshire and South Carolina and pulled into a tie in Iowa.
In Iowa, and she's making a big play to say it'll be those early states that clears the rest of this out and maybe makes it a race for with two different people to potentially try to challenge Donald Trump. And then you've got...
Still in the race and on the debate stage this week, all three of these individuals, Vivek Ramaswamy, Tim Scott, and Chris Christie.
And then you got the outsiders, and we don't know who this guy is. Do you know?
Well, we asked. I mean, you and I were like, we're not trying to be rude, Ryan. We didn't know. Like, this is Ryan Binkley. He's apparently a Texas pastor.
Yep. Probably a good guy. Just we're a little late in the race.
Maybe a great guy.
Maybe an awesome dude, but a little late in the race for just facial recognition. But so that ranking system, a little different than what you would have seen in August. I mean, we're going to talk about this candidate by candidate, but Tim Scott's no longer considered a contender as he was in August. And then you've got a number of people in here no longer in the race as well.
Yeah, you got Larry Elder, Francis Suarez, the Miami mayor, Will Hurd. Asa Hutchinson hangs on to the outsider status for a few more months. But yeah, you've lost people. And Mike Pence.
And Mike Pence, a former vice president, dropped out, basically ran out of money. Had said, hey, I want to run to Iowa, couldn't get there.
So what's the change between then and now? We can focus in on a few candidates. Let's look at Ron DeSantis. Slight variation, 0.2%, but he's pretty much stayed in the same range, Pete. I mean, from the beginning of the launch to now, it's always been polling right in this vicinity.
And we've been a part of the Fox Nation debate analysis with each of these, and in each performance in the debate, it was kind of like there were good moments, there were some not so good moments. He didn't really hurt himself, but he didn't help himself either, and that doesn't surprise you. You don't see much movement after the debates from him.
Yeah, 69% favorability rating in Iowa voters, which is great. But when you're forced to choose, that's what this number reflects. It's the choice is largely going to Donald Trump.
Very much so. And speaking of Donald Trump, DeSantis kind of switched up his approach in that second debate and said, hey, I'm gonna call out Trump, see if that works for me. Here's what he said.
Where's Joe Biden? He's completely missing in action from leadership. And you know who else is missing in action? Donald Trump is missing in action. He should be on this stage tonight. He owes it to you to defend his record where they added $7.8 trillion to the debt.
So you talk to the Trump campaign, they say, hey, why submit yourself to that incoming fire on a debate stage when the people have put you so far ahead to begin with? And obviously, a guy like Ron DeSantis would want Trump on the stage. He's not going to be there in Miami.
I thought you made a really interesting point yesterday, and I talked about it on the Will Cain podcast. It goes up tomorrow. You're arguing for what's going on with Joe Biden and a guy like Gavin Newsom running essentially a shadow campaign in case something happens with Biden. Might have been the path to greater success for Ron DeSantis.
Because people
instead of running into the buzzsaw, he's really well liked.
People love him as a governor of Florida, and when you run headlong into the biggest political movement in a generation, it hasn't worked. And it's unfortunately hurt his popularity with a lot of people, and he's probably not going to be the nominee. What happens next for him after that? But if he had stayed in Florida and said, look over here, I'm great, and if you need me, put me in coach.
In case something happens.
In case something happens, maybe a different scenario.
Who knows?
We'll see.
It's an alternate universe. We'll never know the answer to that. Nikki Haley has seen some movement in her numbers. I'm still only polling at 7.7%, but it's a plus 4.4%. We had this debate yesterday here on Fox and Friends as to why she's seen a rise. And we basically came down to two reasons. One, with the war in the Middle East, she's been the most full-throated, I think it's fair to say, neoconservative voice.
Most hawkish, yes.
Most hawkish. And there's still a wing of the Republican Party that wants to hear that. I think that's a fair analysis. The other is if Ron DeSantis isn't gathering up the anti-Trump vote within the Republican Party, they may have flowed over to Nikki Haley.
And she has been very aggressive in the debates, no doubt. And the one person we haven't really talked that much about so far is Vivek Ramaswamy, who had some big moments in debates, but also has been a big foil for Nikki Haley in those debates as well, which some believe has helped her. Here's a portion of how Nikki Haley talked about those security concerns you're talking about, and also Vivek Ramaswamy.
This is infuriating because TikTok is one of the most dangerous social media apps that we could have. And what you've got, I honestly, every time I hear you, I feel a little bit dumber for what you say. You went and you were in business with the Chinese that gave Hunter Biden $5 million. We can't trust you. We can't trust you.
So, interesting. It'll be more oxygen for every candidate in Miami because a lot of these candidates haven't made the debate threshold. I mean, Nikki Haley certainly has, Vivek Ramaswamy has, so you'll see even more of those exchanges.
Yeah. And then there's Tim Scott, down to 1.6%, I believe, right now, which is a drop of 2.1% since the first debate. He's really caught Pete in a difficult position. In the first debate, people thought, oh, he's not even there. He's too quiet.
Yep.
In the second debate, he clearly tried to correct that, and then he ended up interrupting a lot. And either way, it didn't really work for him on gaining appeal.
No, there's been a lot of hope for him. And you know what? There's a lot of universal appreciation for Tim Scott. His story, his optimistic and positive tone. He's also not attempted to take on Trump the way that DeSantis has, but he also hasn't caught on in the process. So I think it was one of those things, either you rock it out the gates or you don't.
That positivity is reflected. I mean, all of these, DeSantis, did we have Haley's number up here?
It was similar to this number.
They're all,
yeah.
The favorability rating's high. It's not as though a huge rejection in Iowa for any one of these candidates. It's simply a matter of preference.
No doubt. Here's an exchange between Tim Scott and Nikki Haley, both from South Carolina, both looking at that state as one where they could gain some traction. This is from the second debate.
We've lost 100,000 factories in the last 25 years. If we continued on my Made in America plan, we could bring jobs back to America.
I appreciate Tim. We've known each other a long time, but he's been there 12 years and he hasn't done any of that. He hasn't. They've only given 4 budgets on time in 40 years. He was part of that.
You know, one of the biggest takeaways for me in watching, this is going to be an undercard debate again. No Donald Trump, undercard debate. I think interest is going to continue to wane, and the influence of the debates is going to continue to wane. Because the fundamental premise of every candidacy right now underneath Donald Trump is counting on the efficacy of indictments. At this point, the numbers aren't there. You're too far behind. It has to be a fall from Donald Trump with an indictment being effective. And I think the Republican base doesn't like that either. You're counting on the deep state taking, through lawfare, taking Donald Trump down for you to be the candidate.
That is most likely. I would say, with the potential, they're all banking on some type of retail political surprise in an early state like Iowa.
Yep.
So, like, if I can win a few caucuses in Iowa and it puts me up in the top 3, I become an alternative.
Or if I have a strong second and then the field consolidates, then.
Right.
But still, when Trump's at 50 and 60%, it becomes more difficult to see how that changes.